Hi, I'm Raphael Heath, the Head of Geography at the Royal High School, Bath, and this is the seventh part of a series of tutorials explaining how you can go about investigating crime as part of a personal investigation supported by the Royal Geographical Society's Innovative Teaching Grant. In this one I'm going to be looking at how to add primary data to your study, which is clearly an important part of making a study very personal and individual. So let's remind ourselves where we're up to briefly. So we've got a map here, we've got crime data, we might filter crime data. This one's just showing criminal damage in arson, for example. Let's say that's what the study is that we decided to focus on, to see if there's a reason why criminal damage occurred in certain parts of a city. That would have an interesting kind of geographical component to it as to what particular factors encouraged it in those particular streets, perhaps. And we've talked before about sort of enriching the data and bringing in secondary data and so on, such as index of deprivation and so on. But what about bringing in primary data? Because, we brought in some secondary data. We talked about the idea that this kind of enrichment data could be considered a sort of primary data source. But a good investigation would involve typically visiting a site and conducting a bit more research. It may well be that you visit the site first and then you're sort of doing this sort of data, but it may well be that you've done a lot of this data that I've explained in the early tutorials first, and then you've decided where to go and how to go about it as part of the sort of methodology. So you've kind of here, for example, identified that this part of Bath in the centre and this part in Twerton is an area perhaps worth focusing on for your study. And by doing all this exercise initially, you've kind of arrived at that, and then you just collect the primary data to add to this map. Anyway, this is how you need to go about creating collection kind of data files and layers in ArcGIS Online. So first of all, one way to do it is to create a spreadsheet. So you can spreadsheet like Excel, and you just type in the names of things you want to collect. So let's say for this study here, we thought, well, let's go to these places and do a crime vulnerability study. Let's go there and try and ascertain factors that might be making it susceptible to crime and vandalism in particular. Again, there are lots of other things that you could collect primary data on: perception of crime, fear of crime, effects of crime, causes of crime, and so on. But this is one example of something you could sort of collect as some sort of primary fieldwork. So let's say you thought, okay, I'm going to go there and I'm going to create some indicators for vulnerability to crime. So I'm going to give them a score, let's say from 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever, on dereliction. Derelict areas are going to encourage vandalism and other such kind of criminal behaviour, areas that aren't perhaps easily accessible and managed by authorities. I could give it a CCTV score, let's say, for areas with lots of CCTV cameras or few. That could be an actual deliberate count, or it might just be a score out of rating of 1 to 10 in a more subjective way of trying to identify if I'm being looked at or not. That might put off criminal behaviour. Overlooking windows score, perhaps. I look around and say, oh, I've got this area's got 5 windows looking at me, another area's got none, another area's got 50. So I'm going to more like to commit crime in an area that's perhaps got fewer overlooking windows. Perhaps passers-by score, is the area very busy, is it very quiet? Quiet areas maybe get more vandalism than the busy areas, perhaps. Street lighting, for example, is it well or poorly lit in that area? And so these could be all scores that I give it between 1 to 10. I might just have a description field, just something that I anecdotally kind of write about in a bit more sort of text base that I can't show in the map, but I might be collecting that data and just describing it in words. I might add a photo and so on as well. I'll talk about more of that later. So once I've decided what my data is I'm collecting, I've got some examples here. You can come up with your own things probably better than this. I then put in the words longitude and latitude as well, because I need to be able to locate the data. So there's some examples of data I might collect. This is how I set it up, just the top row of the column. I need to just do a couple of other things before I put it into ArcGIS Online. Derelictions is going to be a score, so I'm just going to put 0 in for the moment, just to let ArcGIS Online that this is a number. I could put any number in, 1 or whatever, but I'm just going to put zeros in for the moment. Passers-by score, street lighting score. Now description is going to be text. I'm going to leave that blank, or I could write in it. Put letter A in it, I suppose. And then longitude and latitude. Now, I'm going to show you the easiest way to do this, actually. We're going to basically be putting the data in within ArcGIS Online. Theoretically, you could put all the data into the spreadsheet here and bring it in, but then you've got to fiddle around with longitude and latitude for each site, which is going to be a bit tricky. But but you could do it in advance. So you could go here and work out where all sites are. If you use the measure tool, let's just do it for one location and do the rest of it in the easier way. If I use the measure tool, I've got the option to find my location, and if I hover over the map, as you can see here, it gives me longitude and latitude, so it's changed. So if I just click on any point on the map, it actually doesn't matter where I click it, because I can always move a dot later. But let's say I know I'm going to go to this part of Twerton and collect some data around here. So it's giving me the longitude and latitude for that location here, and then when I move around it changes to other places. So this is the one I want. So the longitude is minus 2.39 and so on. So I'm just going to try and select that all, including the minus number, and just copy it. So let's paste that into here. It's having a little bit of a slow moment, but I think it will do it. Latitude. Right, went into the wrong column. Right, let's move that across. There we go, longitude. So there's my number for longitude. It's got the whole number in there, you can see. It's only showing a few of the decimal points there. And then my latitude example is there. Copy and paste. Okay. It needs a bit of thinking time to do this paste. There we go. So I've done it for one site. You can see the principle. If I had set all my sites up, let's say I was going to 5, 10 places, I could do this in advance. But there's no necessary need to, depending on how you're collecting your data. So let's just do it for one as an example. Then I need to save my file. You can see it's got no data in, but I'll correct that later. They're all zeros. I'm going to do save this file, save as, put it in a folder where I'm going to retrieve it later. Give it a name, and the important thing is under here not to click Excel workbook, which it would be to start with, but to have this one CSV, delimited selected. That's the right format for bringing it into this GIS mapping software. Then it says crime vulnerability survey. I've already done this one already. Do I want to replace it? Yes, okay. So it gives me a bit of an error message there about, or a warning message about the fact that it's a CSV file. It can't do all the functionality a full Excel would do. File. So anyway, I've set up this data with one row of data. Let's say, in reality I'm going to go to several sites, but I'm just setting up like this as a very quick way of doing it. Okay, so now I go back to my map, and I want to bring the data into the map. The way I do this is I go to my folders, and it's already in the right place. ArcGIS crime data here. I brought some data in I showed you before, and now I've got my crime vulnerability survey data I've literally just created. So I'm just going to drag it and drop it into the map as such, and I'm just going to get rid of this layer in front of me, and it's just asking me for some information. It's saying what are the location fields, so it didn't recognize longitude and latitude. So I'm just going to tell it that that's the longitude and that one is the latitude data, and that should help locate it. Okay, I don't need to do anything else, but I need to tell it that's where the data is. So if I say add layer now, fingers crossed, it is putting this data on the street where I pick that longitude and latitude from, as you can see as I zoom out in this part of Twerton. So that's where I was going to do some data analysis, and it's tried to make some symbols. In fact, the symbols are nonsense. I'm going to say location only. Under options, I might make that symbol just a little bit bigger and clearer so I can spot it against other things. Shapes, stick to a simple shape there. There you go. And what should I pick? An orange dot. A little bit bigger, so it stands out from everything else. Okay, could have picked a bigger dot really, couldn't I? Okay, so there we go. So it's got my data layer into the map. So you can see crime vulnerability surveys here. I've got a dot on the map. If I click on it, it's the data for this particular location. A couple of things I need to sort out for this layer is this one, it says enable editing. At the moment it won't let me edit the layer, so I need to click that in order to allow it to edit. So I'm going to click that now. And now if I click on the dot, you see this little option comes up to edit this data. So let's say now I've actually done my field work, or maybe I'm in the field with a computer or a tablet device, and I've actually called the map up. It's quite possible I could do that. Or I could use something called the Esri Collector app, where I share this layer for editing there, and I could access it theoretically through app. It's a little bit complicated to show that. So what I'm showing you is the simplest way. As I say, you could be doing this in the field, but only if you've got online access and open up the map like this. Otherwise, you could do it in the old-fashioned paper way and then come back to school and click the data in. So let's say I've come here and I've done a dereliction score, and it scores out of 10, let's say, and it's got no CCTV here. It's got quite a few windows overlooking it, so I'm going to give it. So low score on this is I have to make sure I'm clear about what I'm collecting, how I'm collecting it. Let's say a low score here is always a good thing, and a high score is a bad thing for crime vulnerability. So lots of windows overlooking gets 1, let's say. I could have made that a little bit clearer in the way I set it out, but I'll leave it at that for the moment. Passers-by score. Not many passers-by, let's say. Street lighting is not that great, 7. And description, this is where I could type in this area is very derelict and has whatever I want to say. Lots of broken bottles around and so on. Youths hanging around. So, oops, delete. Wasn't thinking right, just deleted it, not very good. So I'll show you how to create a new feature, having got rid of that one. So click on new feature and click that dot, just created 2 new features, and do that exercise again. So dereliction, whatever I gave it, CCTV score, just made up numbers here, and so on. Here's whatever I write. Now you notice that longitude latitude is here, but I don't need to write anything in there because I've located it just manually on the map. I pressed delete last time, which was a silly thing to do, but if I press close, there you go, the data is there. There's no save button, it literally goes in as you type. So let's say that was one location. I've got another dot up here. Once I've clicked it, I can move it. So let's say my next fieldwork site was over here, and I was doing a similar exercise, and I collected the data, and dereliction is very low here. CCTV, there's lots of it. Let's give it a 1. Windows overlooking is quite a few. Passers-by, pretty busy. Street lighting, good. 3. Description, this is a very busy area. Whatever I write there, leave longitude, latitude, fine, and close that. So I'm just accumulating data for different sites that I've gone to and visited, and you can see the principle. I can put another one up here. And so on. Okay, so I put some data in, and you can see how I can quite easily manually do that for this map. So you created a layer where you put data in, and you can visualize that data now. So this is your primary original data. It's just showing location, but you've got all the data that you put in. So let's say you want to show something like dereliction score, and then you can see those have changed the size of that data to show dereliction score or CCTV score or whatever it might be that you want to focus on, to explain perhaps why different areas score differently on different factors and whether that helps explain the crime patterns in that area. So that's how you can sort of create primary data. You can do it for the schools like I just showed. You might just be pinpointing locations, so you could actually just have dots on the map for locations of streetlights, let's say, to see if it sort of had any effect, or CCTV cameras, or specific buildings like pubs or late night establishments, supermarkets, other things that might be attracting different types of criminal behaviour. So you could actually just pinpoint locations on here, perhaps give them scores, perhaps not, to show some factors. Let's just save this map to keep this data that I've been working on and all the layers that are in it. You can see this map's got lots of layers now. As you start working, maps get more and more sophisticated and complicated with what you've perhaps included in them. If I just go onto here, I just want to show you 1 or 2 more things. Right, let's just save this layer. So one of the things that's, this is kind of a layer that's just in the map, but it's not what's called a feature service. It has certain features that are limited. For example, I couldn't use this as it stands to use on what's called the collector app in order to collect data. So I'll just show you this briefly. So crime vulnerability survey, data collection, let's call it. Give it a tag, crime data. Test, whatever. This is my crime vulnerability survey. Okay, and I'll put that in my folder that I want to save it in. So pick the folder where you want to save all your work and create item. So I mentioned this sort of briefly before, but this is what's called creating a feature service or a layer that can be added to any map, including tablet apps that you might want to use when you're out in the field perhaps. So now I've got the option to show item details. If I go to that, you will see that there are certain settings you can set up for a layer, which is a little bit more subtle, but might be useful and interesting if you want to try this out. So this tells me a little bit about the layer itself, the name of it, the sharing of the layer. So at the moment it's not shared with anyone, I can share that layer with everyone. That makes it easier to get to and change. Under the edit I can change some of the functionality of it there, such as protecting it from being deleted and so on. Save. Let's just double check that. Edit. Save. Okay. Let's go back to the map. Click on that. And it'll open it back in the map. Okay. Yeah, if you add the data this way, actually looking at it, it doesn't look like you can use it in a tablet, but it will do the functionality I've just shown for you. You can open this particular page in tablet, but you can't open the specific web app to edit it. But you can bring in the data like this. Perhaps I'll just show you this one last slightly more complicated approach to it. If you add the data in a slightly different way, if you go to My Content, it'll have a slightly different functionality in it. And you bring the data in, so you find a folder to put it in, add item. I've talked about adding items in an earlier tutorial when we added the crime data originally. And I'm just going to find the file. I'll show you one thing it does slightly differently. So this is the crime vulnerability survey. This won't have the data in, this is just the original one I set up. I need to give it a tag. I'm just going to call it test crime data here. Now this time it has recognised longitude latitude, so it's done it a slightly different way. It recognises these ones are integers where I'm going to put in numbers, and this description is a string, so where I put in my text. So these are strange terms, but street lighting, you can see when you pick it, you can have it as a date or integer, which means number, and so on. You can have it as a double, which means you can have decimal points, so 0.5, or an integer meaning 1, 2, 3, and so on here. So it's done all that automatically based on the fact that I put zeros and an A in that letter, and it knows the longitude latitude. I'll just go add item, because if you set it up the way I've shown you, that will work as you see here. And you won't need to do anything else for it. So I'm now creating what's called a feature service, so it's creating a layer based on these. So similar to what I was doing before by bringing it into the map, but there's one or two very slight subtle differences. You'll notice it's got a feature service map contents there which it didn't have on the other one, which means it can do certain different things, and which I'll show you in a moment once it's finished doing its work. So there we go, it's just doing a little bit of thinking, and let's finish that. So you can see it's come down with a drop down menu here which have certain more options. It didn't give me that under the last option. If I go on to share, I'll share this map with everyone. That helps to make it easier to use. I'll go on to edit now. You'll see there's slightly different options here, usual stuff about putting in your text and so on, but there's a few more options here. I could put delete protection if I want, but edit, this allows editing to happen, export data if I want, allow sync. So this is a particularly useful thing if you're using the Esri Collector app, which I can't really show you fully at the moment, but basically if you set it like this, you log on, you download the free Esri Collector app, and then you open this map that we just made in it, you'll be able to edit the map within it, and there's an option here to even do it offline, which means you can be out in the field with no internet, no Wi-Fi connection, continue editing the map as normal once you've set it up for offline editing, and then when you come back to a Wi-Fi zone, just click update. That's quite useful. So I just wanted to show you that functionality, which is kind of hidden in the layer settings once you make it. And also you can do this little thing here which says enable attachments. Enable attachments, which we'll see the effect of in a moment. Enable attachments come up. So if I open this, add layer to map, so this is the layer with we created with the Excel file with no data in it, or zeros in it anyway. I'll just bring it into my original map with all the other layers in there. It's just taking a moment or two to load. So study areas, the dots and so on. And here it is, it's trying to make a symbol for it. I don't really want it to do that. I'll just go to show location only and options. Pick a, it's not going to be clear to see if I don't do this, so I'm just going to pick a star, let's say, just to make it clear where it is. Okay, so this works in the same way as the last layer. I've got options to put data in and edit it, as I said before, but I set it up in a slightly different way. So you saw it's slightly longer-winded to set it up, but actually it's more powerful as a layer to set it up that way. And if I go under edit now, you'll see it allows me to have an attachment as well, which is quite interesting because it means I could put a file or an image in there. So let's just take a search for Bath Streets images, just as an example. So let's say this was the street I was doing my crime investigation on, and I'd got an image and perhaps uploaded it to somewhere on the web. Let's see, this one's not a good choice. Let's see if that one is. Where's this coming from? WordPress. Just need to pick an image that is a JPEG file. See if I go to the site if it'll work. You could put a link to an image in. There we go. Okay, that'll work. Copy. So I'm just copying the link address, which you didn't let me do from the shortcut menu. But anyway, browse. Okay, I thought it was a URL that wanted a link to an image, but actually it's even simpler. It's just an image that so maybe I've got an image saved somewhere. Let's find an image somewhere, which I'll do. So there we go. Just open, and hopefully it's added it. Close. So that could have let me put in an image, and I could do that in the field as well using the Collector app. So let's turn off layers I don't want. There you go. So it's got the attachment, it's got that image there within it. In fact, I could be a little bit cleverer, I think. And see if this works. I just go to the configure pop-up and say add image, add an image, image 1, caption URL, link. I thought, so I'm missing it as I'm going past, that the image, no, that won't work. Okay, forget that, but the image is there, and if I click on it, it is viewable, and there are other ways that you can use story maps and stuff to visualize and view that image. So there's just another thought and idea about that. But what I've shown you there is the idea of adding primary data to your study. This ways of creating it in a spreadsheet, then importing it, bring it into ArcGIS Online. The simplest way is just drop and drag it in, but you could use the adding and the contents I showed you, which then is useful if you are going to try the offline and app-based data input for it, which I can't show you fully now, but just to show you the principle behind it. But otherwise, just use the first method I showed. So I'm Raphael Heath, Head of Geography at the Royal High School, Bath, and this whole project is supported by the Royal Geographical Society's Innovative Teaching Grant.